The future of man's existence may depend on the oceans. They could be the answer to feeding and even housing millions of people. But when we turn to this last great resource, will it still be there? The Caribbean, for most people, it is a paradise. Each year, millions of vacationers and sport divers enjoy these crystal blue seas. But today, John Stoneman and members of the Foundation for Ocean Research have come to these idyllic waters to deal with potential danger. At his destination, Stoneman joins up with the rest of the Foundation team, and they head out to sea. 2 days ago, a fierce tropical hurricane passed through these islands. Counted among its casualties were a number of freighters. One of these wrecks is the focus of Stoneman's attention.
As we go over the local charts, I explain the situation to the team. Our Caribbean headquarters has picked up strong evidence that the vessel we are seeking was carrying toxic waste. If something isn't done quickly, the beautiful reef below us may wind up as a memory. Along the way, we pass another casualty of the storm. This one only beached.
Working from the information available, the team locates the spot. The anchor is dropped and equipment is ready.
I can't tell a bit about the fish. Talk to me about gold. Like
Stoneman alone will do the reconnaissance dive.
Oh, I love that.
If indeed this ship was carrying toxic waste, the damage that potentially could be done would be totally irreparable. I pray that we are not too late. There she is, lying in about 50 feet of water. Her radar and electronics, silent reminders of how futile man's intentions can be against the fury of the sea. As I enter the vessel, I am unsure of what awaits. The evidence of man's presence is still here. Shelves, pictures still fast to walls, all cryptic reminders of the crew who walked her decks only days before.
Stoneman spots the drums. There are about 18 to 20 barrels. Their contents clearly marked. Toxic chemicals. Stoneman investigates them. Then suddenly, he pulls his hand back. He's been burned. One or more of the drums must be leaking. the task will be more difficult than he had hoped. Having surveyed the wreck and the position of the drums, the expedition leader returns to the surface.
Well, she's laying in about 50 feet of water. I've been into one of the holds. There's about 20 drums in it. There are also 2 or 3 drums littered around the outside. They probably come off the deck, and relatively easy to get them out, I would think. But
we'll get our wetsuit and equipment together.
well, I put dry suits on because we're going to have to wash you down. I've got a lot of burning in my hands, and I think it's coming through the rubber.
All right, why don't you get out there right away and we'll get some treatment onto those hands.
Yes, I'll come out now.
While medical attention is given to the expedition leader's hand, he puts his mind to the task ahead.
This classic sailing vessel and its crew gracefully tack by, while below, a dangerous situation worsens by the minute. Even if the barrels are not leaking now, they soon will be as the salt water corrodes them. Just a few cups of these chemicals will not only destroy the reef and the fish living on it, but also seriously endanger the people in this area who rely on fish as their staple diet.
Stoneman sketches out the plan of action for the crew. Dry suits will be used in an attempt to protect the divers from any chemical leakage. Still, the foundation team could be in great jeopardy. The decision is made to photograph the operation, to document the plight of these unprotected reefs. If this area were a legal sanctuary, which these beautiful reefs should be, this vessel would not have been allowed to pass through here with its hazardous cargo. And Stoneman, his team, and most importantly the reef, would not be in the danger in which they now find themselves. After satisfying themselves that there are no holes in these drums, the team starts the task of lifting the exterior barrels strewn around the boat. The drums each weigh about 400 pounds. On board, the containers are washed down with fresh water as a precaution, checked for structural integrity, and then secured on deck. With all the exterior barrels lifted, the foundation divers return to the wreck, this time equipped with underwater lamps to recheck the area surrounding the site before attempting to remove the drums still inside the wreck. Some members of the team stop to examine the damage that caused the sinking of the vessel. Satisfied that the surrounding reef is safe, the team now enters the wreck to continue the operation. They will now begin the hazardous procedure of raising the interior barrels. Rope slings are tied fast to the barrels, which will be pulled up through the hold. Great care must be taken. A drum, falling from a sling, would crash down onto the vessel, splitting open, spewing its festering contents all over the reef. On board, other team members use the boom to lift the heavy containers, fending them off from smashing the sides of their own vessel. The crew uses makeshift masks to protect themselves from fumes. The efforts of the team on board and the divers below must be totally coordinated.
The irony is, however, that this incident need never have happened. Were this area a legal undersea sanctuary, a ship carrying toxic waste would never have been allowed to pass over these magnificent reefs.
The raising of the last barrel marks the end of a long and dangerous day. The team members have put themselves in peril, but a far greater disaster has been averted.
Next stop, Bonaire, an undersea sanctuary where such a problem could never have occurred. In addition to a well-earned rest, the crew and I take some time to study this model sanctuary, which should be a standard for the rest of the Caribbean.
Here in Bonaire, a truly admirable plan of coral reef conservation has begun to pay big dividends. This, together with very constant air and sea temperatures, have made this tiny island in the Dutch Antilles the underwater wonder of the Caribbean. The local government has embarked on a very serious program to protect their reefs. In this sanctuary, such commonplace activities as spearfishing or taking coral for souvenirs are strictly prohibited. In addition, boats may not anchor on the reefs, but rather must use moorings set up by the sanctuary authorities. This prevents the reef from being damaged by anchors dragging along the coral. Vessels carrying potentially hazardous cargoes are not allowed over these reefs. Thus, problems such as oil spills or the toxic waste situation that the Foundation encountered 2 days ago could never happen in these protected waters. Corals of every hue and description cover the reef in an unblemished mosaic of color. Animated schools of healthy marine creatures traverse the sea bottom as if choreographed. All is healthy, vibrant, and alive. Nowhere in these crystal waters can be seen the pollution and destruction that is normally the mark of man's presence.
After our encounter with waste materials and the near destruction of one of nature's greatest creations, I feel a renewed faith in what man can do if he puts his mind and energies in the right direction. All around us, vast schools of Caribbean fish flourish, totally unthreatened by the divers. This is a magnificent example of the living reef. The need for undersea sanctuaries like this is paramount. Scientists have already proved that man can create habitats in the sea, and in addition to the obvious food sources, actual farming of the sea bottom, or aquaculture, has already begun in some parts of the world. Of course, indiscriminate fishing or the breaking up of nature's food chain, which is what happens when a reef is destroyed, could leave the oceans barren and worthless. And all this without even mentioning the problem of healthy drinking water, which can now be produced from the sea with very little effort.
the barrels of toxic waste left on the reef to do their destruction represent man's folly and negligence, then undersea sanctuaries represent the intelligent contribution man could make to life on this planet.
Don, your name has become...
Stoneman takes time to talk to Captain Don Stewart to discuss the work being done to protect Bonaire's coral reefs.
We talk about our reefs, and everybody talks about which reef seems to be showing the greatest wear. And we will actually do that. We'll cut the chains and everything off and drop it. And incidentally, it may be very interesting to you to note that on the design of our moorings, that we do not have chains that lay across the bottom, but actually a rope that rises directly to the flotation, which acts as a pneumatic sponge, so as the boat folds, the mooring is pulled down. And actually, it never actually touches the coral at all.
Not only are we concerned with the man's intentional destruction of the coral reefs here in Bonaire, we've also addressed ourselves to man's intelligent use and management of the coral reefs and how we can enter these reefs on a day-to-day basis.
We also do an awful lot of work for many of the universities, a lot of the marine biologists. And I always pick their brains quite extensively. And I find some frightening things.
Well, there's one thing that I can say without any reservation at all. The diving here is probably some of the best to be found anywhere in the Caribbean, and I suspect most of that is due to the conservation efforts made by the islanders themselves, and of course you, Captain Don.
I've always felt that if Greenwich has time, and the Catholics have the Vatican, I think that conservation ought to have Bonaire.
I think that's absolutely right, and it certainly does.
En route home from Bonaire, Stoneman and some members of the Foundation team make a purposeful stop in Florida at the John Pennencamp Coral Reef State Park, another undersea sanctuary that can be compared to the conservation program yielded in Bonaire.
I still cannot get our earlier incident with the toxic waste out of my mind. There is much to do in the fight for the creation of undersea sanctuaries. I plan on using the footage that we shot during the raising of the barrels and the film that we just took in Bonaire as part of presentations the Foundation is making to Caribbean governments for the establishment of undersea sanctuaries. We have come here to Pennencamp Park to further document our case for the need for these sanctuaries.
The John Pennencamp Coral Reef State Park is named for the Miami Herald newspaper editor who fought for its establishment. Located in the Florida Keys, just off the coast of Key Largo, it covers an area of 100 square miles. It is looked upon as one of the healthiest reefs in the world. Work on its establishment began in the early 50s. Then, as now, many people thought of coral reefs as inexhaustible resources. Coral and shell collectors and spear fishermen all took their toll. Fortunately, concern for the marine environment won out. And in 1959, this underwater park and marine preserve was born. The state protects the waters from Key Largo to the 3-mile limit, while the federal government looks after the area from the 3-mile limit to the continental shelf.
Once protected, the marine life here, including the reef itself, staged a dramatic comeback, and ever since has continued to grow and flourish. Almost 500,000 tourists, including some 200,000 divers, now visit the area regularly, diving, snorkeling, or even taking glass-bottom boat rides. At the park entrance, there is even a short slide presentation showing how long it takes for a reef like this to develop, and sadly, how little time it takes to destroy it. Education is again the key. I wonder how many of the people that visited here last year knew that coral is made up of living animals, and that by breaking just one piece of it, it kills all that live within it.
The Department of Natural Resources is always seeking ways to update its preservation techniques. To this end, they have recently adopted the mooring system, also used in the Bonaire Sanctuary, to prevent anchor damage. Improper anchor placement in the park is in fact illegal.
This fine example of marine conservation will be just one more solid plank in our arguments for the establishment of undersea sanctuaries. Bonaire and Pennencamp are the models to be followed. Indeed, that must be followed to preserve the coral reefs of our world. The work being done in places like these is an inspiration and a cause for hope. Perhaps this hope is best symbolized by this, the park symbol. The statue of Christ of the abyss, holding his hands to the heavens, a symbol of hope and protection.
Sadly, these man-made undersea sanctuaries are needed to protect nature against man himself. As always, he is the most dangerous creature in this, the last frontier.